So we have a lot of drama in regards to Tesla stock that we absolutely have to go ahead and touch on, especially as we witnessed a little over a 6% drop for Tesla stock today alone. And I want to go ahead and highlight and kind of touch on why we ended up seeing a lot of selling pressure take place for Tesla stock today alone, while the broader markets ended up holding their weight pretty well. Now, I want to provide a quick warning that things get a little politically heated and a bit crazy, and so I just kind of want to put that out there. And I encourage you guys to watch this video to its entirety so that you guys could see what exactly is taking place for Tesla and what do I think is likely to take place next. Now, real quick, before we actually break down what's going on with Tesla, I just want to share a trade idea that I shared for those within the Push and Profit private group, which was HIMS, which actually did a whopping a little over 19% for today alone. And this was a trade idea I shared for those within the Push and Profit private group, which for those of you guys that don't know, every day the markets are open. I share a daily briefing talking about what's going on with the markets from a macro perspective, also talk about things from a technical perspective, and what are things that I'm looking at. And I always share that these are not buy or sell recommendations, right? This is just simply, what I see from a technical perspective, and I layer it with different types of analysis. Now, I shared last night within the Push and Profit private group, I usually do it in video format, but I wrote it in text format at 11:03 p.m. last night that as a trade idea, I'll be watching HIMS for a breakout from a technical perspective. But I said that as a catalyst, we recently had Trump nominate Dr. Marty Makary as FDA commissioner, which could bring significant opportunities for HIMS. And the reason being is because HIMS, which is a telehealth company that provides online access to healthcare and prescription medications, he currently sits as the chief medical officer at Sesame, which is a company that currently focuses on making healthcare more affordable, including etc. You guys could just read this. But I mentioned how Dr. Makary, who leads, could potentially lead the FDA to push for changes that makes it easier and faster for companies like HIMS to get approval for new medications or treatments, especially those aimed at making healthcare more affordable and accessible. And that this could really help HIMS expand its offering and reach more customers, right? And so I talked about how I think that, right now a break over $25.73 would suggest a signal to go long. And last night I shared how currently it's above that in the after hours. And so if we hold above that at the opening bell, that's good news. And I'll likely hold till $30, which would be a 14% gain. And what did we end up seeing? Well, we actually did indeed see, as I shared last night at 11 p.m., that we held up above those areas. And so I took a position and we saw a strong push upwards and this huge move to the upside, a little over $30, right? I said that I was going to hold this to $30. This actually went up to $31.45. But of course, I'll take it. I'll take the extra gains. Now, I layered this for the technical perspective as, this had kind of this little technical breakout, and breaking above that would be bullish. But for those that are familiar with the channel, you guys know that I don't like to just look at things from this kind of one-dimensional approach of just looking at the levels of the charts, right? Oftentimes you see people on YouTube or even X kind of talk about the price levels for a stock, and they'll say, well, if this stock falls below this price level, then that's bad news, or if it goes above it, that's good news. And oftentimes they lack the understanding of what actually pushes the stock up or actually pushes the stock down. And so I like to take this holistic approach and kind of layer, the catalyst events, the geopolitical climate, the fundamentals, the macros, right? And kind of synthesize everything together to kind of get a better understanding of the markets. And so if you're interested in getting access to my daily briefings where I talk about what is it that I'm looking at, make sure to check out the links in the description below, because one of the links is going to be a link to join for just $6 this month alone, right? So definitely check that out. This is one of the biggest sales. It's our Black Friday sale. It expires this Friday, of course. So definitely check that out. But going back to Tesla, right? I want to go ahead and touch on why did we see a lot of selling while the broader markets actually did well. In fact, we look at Tesla, it did hit new highs, but it had this drop. And then you take a look at the SPY, and it actually just had this, new highs pushing upwards. And so what did we see? Well, we actually saw, and this was pretty interesting, Gavin Newsom vowed to offer EV rebates if Trump cuts the 7,500 federal tax credits. Now, we talked about just a week and a half ago of how the Trump administration is likely to cut the EV tax credits that have been very beneficial for Tesla. And so him introducing a new program for EV rebates is great news, right? You would say, well, Justin, that's bullish for Tesla. But here's something interesting, right? Now, this is just a proposal of creating a new version of a program that ended last year, and this is going to go for all the EVs, including the plug-in hybrids. And this is, of course, apparently to make it more affordable for people to drive vehicles that don't pollute. Everyone knows that California leans very to the left. They're very liberal and very progressive, and they're looking to bring down the pollution, right? Not bad, right? Of course, right? There's things that we don't have to go there, right? But interestingly, you would say, well, this is good for Tesla. But the governor said that cars made by Tesla, the world's most valuable automaker, and potentially other car makers may not be eligible for the rebate program, an effort to encourage market competition. Now, this is where it gets pretty interesting, right? Because what we see in Europe, a lot of the European nations, and also in America, is kind of this idea of imposing tariffs to the EVs in China that are ridiculously cheap, simply because that could just flood the U.S. markets or even the European markets. In Europe, they're already starting with the tariffs. We haven't done it in America, but Europe has done this because it really hurts the domestic companies, right? Of course, Europe has a lot of its own domestic companies that produces EVs, etc. And so, with an influx of those cheap Chinese vehicles, that could really hurt the demand and the business of those, domestic companies that employ a lot of the employees or people in those separate countries. And so kind of in America, we had that same idea of, hey, let's kind of impose tariffs on those Chinese vehicles, especially because, it could really hurt a lot of the American companies. For example, Tesla is one of those American companies, but it's also, the GMs, the Fords. I know they produce a minuscule amount of EVs, but the idea is that, we kind of want to create this environment that's more favorable towards domestic companies, because of course these plants employ a lot of workers. We saw how the strikes from all these companies can influence what's going on in the economy. And so what's interesting is, well, California and Gavin Newsom are saying, well, no, we actually want to encourage those other Chinese vehicles, likely I'm sure he's referring to the Chinese vehicles and others, to increase market competition. So very interesting. Now, people are kind of speculating that this is something to do with kind of this feud that Newsom and Elon Musk has, as they've been at odds, especially as Musk has criticized California many times for different like social policies and just several different things. In fact, Tesla at one point moved its headquarters to Texas, away from California, right? And so there's kind of like this heated debate, or kind of landscape where we have Elon Musk, who was kind of once more of a moderate, who's now leaning very far to the right, and then you have this leader of kind of the Democrat Party, Gavin Newsom, who may kind of have a vendetta against Elon Musk and Tesla. But it kind of gets a bit more interesting because, again, today we also got the news that the largest public fund in the U.S. has made some changes to its stock portfolio and has sold a significant amount of Tesla shares. And so what's interesting is that this largest public fund, or pension, that's actually the California Public Employee Retirement System, known as CalPERS. Now, we know that California is a huge state, huge population, right? And so, of course, they're going to have one of the largest pensions. And so they actually cut their stake in Tesla in half, right? And, there's not exact reasoning why, but many are speculating, again, it's kind of this attack on Tesla, as, there's kind of been this feud with, Elon Musk, the right and the left. Now, again, you guys are free to make up whatever you believe is likely why we're seeing, kind of this war against Tesla from California. Again, I really don't like to delve into the realm of politics. I know as a market participant, you kind of have to understand with the geopolitical climate and also what's going on domestically from a political standpoint, right? Not my favorite part of my analysis, right? I like looking at things from the fundamentals. I like looking at things from the technicals. I like looking at the macro, environment. Don't like looking at the political environment. Not a big fan. And also, when you hear about wars from a geopolitical climate, not a big fan of that. But regardless of what I'm a fan of, you have to kind of understand what's going on. And so, it kind of seems like things are getting pretty heated. Now, again, does seem like it's an attack, but the way it's kind of blanketed, it's not, directly like a middle finger to Elon or Tesla, but Kind of seems like that. You guys make up your minds, whatever. But I want to go ahead and touch on what I think is likely to take place. Now, from a technical perspective, yes, we did see a lot of selling pressure, but we ended up falling down to this area where there's a lot of volume relative to price, which means that there's a lot of exchange in between buyers and sellers. And so that creates areas of supports and resistances. And so that kind of creates a support for Tesla to likely hold up. Now, if it breaks below that area and then we fall down to this pocket, a little volume relative to price, well, we could see kind of the move downwards be amplified. And so we want to kind of keep an eye on Tesla kind of holding above this area. And if you're someone who believes in the mission of Tesla and wants to go long and you've been buying Tesla, then maybe that's an opportunity to buy in if it does bounce off this area. Again, I don't share buy or sell recommendations. You should only trade or invest in, whatever you see value in. But that's kind of where I'm going to be looking at Tesla. I'm not adding more shares of Tesla into my portfolio. I've made several videos talking about why I don't need to kind of delve into the reasoning. But, from what I see, we may end up seeing Tesla stock bounce. Now, from a technical perspective, we are seeing a lot of strong momentum. I think I shared it in my previous video that we're likely to have this Thanksgiving rally, and part of what supports that is, and I shared this within the Push and Profit private group, and I'll quickly share it here, is we have what we call market breadth, right? We're looking at RSP, which is the S&P 500 equally weighted, right? The S&P 500 has a little over 500 companies at its current state, but the weighting is very heavy towards those big mega cap companies. And so essentially you could be deceived by looking at the S&P 500 alone. You could see the market hitting new highs, and that could just be because the Apples, the Teslas, the Metas, the Microsofts are doing good, and maybe 400 other companies are doing horrible. But what we're actually seeing is strong market breadth, where we see RSP, right, the S&P 500, equally weighted, meaning all companies in the S&P 500 have the same weighting, push up. That means that there's a strong momentum between a lot of the companies in the market, and so that's good, right? You want to look at the advance and decline, and kind of see, well, are we having more stocks participating in the S&P 500 push up? And so that's kind of what we're seeing. And so this kind of signals that the move up is pretty robust, and that's great news. And so that could likely kind of tie into Tesla. Well, this may just be a temporary thing because of the news with Gavin and California and the funds, the pension. And so if we hold up here and the overall markets is holding up, that may provide an opportunity. Again, you do whatever you see value in, but from a technical perspective, we're seeing markets pretty strong. Now, I do have to kind of admit that we're seeing a lot of rebalancing, and we're seeing kind of a lot of the small caps, the smaller companies. And we talked about that within the Push and Profit private group earlier as well, just a couple of weeks ago, right? We have this descending trend line, this ascending triangle pattern, and we talked about this breakout for small caps, but it's not just the technicals. Why is it that small caps are pushing up? Well, if you understand the political environment, we know that the Trump administration wants to kind of ease on a lot of regulations, and this helps a lot of the smaller companies who don't have the funds to afford all the lawyers and all the legal paperwork that all these big companies can, and it makes it more easier for them to grow. They could also take on debt at a cheaper rate. So there's a lot going on that's very bullish for the small caps, and so that's why we're seeing a lot of the smaller companies participate into a strong rally, and that is causing market breadth to be strong, which could be a plus for Tesla. But with that said, I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be. Hopefully you guys got some value. Make sure to subscribe, by the way, if you haven't done so already. I forget to say subscribe, and check out the links in the description below. With that said, I'll see you guys on this next video right over here. Take care, guys.